Welcome to this concurrent session. My name is Yakut Ghazi. I serve as the Vice Provost for Learning Innovation and Digital Education here at Duke University. I've been here for 2 years. It's a long title, but what it means is we bring evidence-based programs and services to Duke faculty, staff, and students from a pre-college to post-career perspective. So incorporation of sound pedagogies, sound technologies into Duke learning environments is what we do. And then because I have that lifetime education focus in my title and in my organization, I always try to broaden the impact of lifelong learning because, let's face it, it's a pretty elite activity. So like if we can take a moment to recognize our privilege here, being able to sit and dedicate a half day to learning when this is not something that is always available to others. And what my team and I try to do is to expand Duke's impact to broaden Duke's education and Duke learning opportunities to everybody. So today I have two amazing individuals, two amazing leaders that I will get to chat with, Abdullah Antepli and Luke Powery. I'm going to introduce them based on their bios, but those bios are huge. So I'm going to shorten them, but they will have an opportunity to talk to us about themselves and their backgrounds and how that impacts their leadership skills. So here we go. My friend Abdullah Antepli, hoş geldin dostum.
Hoş bulduk efendim.
Is the director of Polis Center for Politics and professor of the practice in the Stanford School of Public Policy. And Imam Antepli, as he's known as, is a globally acknowledged scholar and leader of cross-religious and cross-cultural dialogue in American higher education and in the nonprofit world. He has built multiple organizations and initiatives to facilitate religious and spiritual life across America's colleges, college campuses, sowing seeds of understanding between religions while upholding their cultural integrity and dignity. What an important thing to do, especially these days. In July 2019, Antepli joined the Stanford School of Public Policy as Associate Professor of the Practice with a secondary appointment at the Divinity School. And he is a person who lived in multiple countries, in Myanmar and Malaysia, and here in the United States. And of course, we share a common heritage going back to Turkey. And then he also served at the Wesleyan University. He is Duke's first Muslim chaplain and director of Center for Muslim Life. Then he served as Duke's chief representative for Muslim affairs. And he's one of the most prominent Muslim leaders in U.S. higher education, international higher education, in fact, today. And he is married with 2 kids who are now out of the house. Another
Big chance in life.
And so I'm going to now talk about Reverend Dr. Luke Powery. He's the Dean of Duke Chapel and Professor of Homiletics and African American Studies. Luke holds faculty appointments in Duke's Divinity School and Department of African American Studies, and he's a national leader in the theological study of the art of preaching, which is what homiletics is. I didn't know it until I read your bio. I didn't know what it means, so.
Many people don't know. That's fine.
You see, that's leadership. Thank you for making me feel better. Dean Powery is a national leader who regularly delivers sermons at the Duke Chapel as well as churches throughout the United States and abroad. He's often a keynote speaker and lecturer at educational institutions, conferences, symposia, and retreats. He's a prolific and award-winning author and served in ecumenical capacity in churches throughout Switzerland, Canada, and the United States. Prior to his appointment at Duke, he served as the Perry and Georgia Engel Assistant Professor of Homiletics at Princeton. He received his Bachelor of Arts in Music with a concentration in vocal performance from Stanford University. I'm always so jealous of people with multiple talents. We have a saying in Turkish, you coincided with God's free time, right?
Yes.
He worked.
Wow.
Both of you. So then he received a Master's of Divinity from Princeton Theological Seminary and his Doctor of Theology from Emmanuel College at the University of Toronto. all really leading institutions of the planet. He's married with 2 children as well, not quite out of the house, but
Not quite.
getting
Almost
there.
empty
Almost,
nest, yeah.
almost. So what is this conversation about? This conversation is about transformative leadership that enables leaders to drive positive change, foster innovation, and build resilient ethical organizations that thrive in today's dynamic business and academic environments. So this conversation is going to be both about leading the whole person and leading as the whole person, because the two sort of go hand in hand. What I will do is start with a softball question. I don't really understand baseball, but I use these baseball terms like, oh, that's not baseball, that's softball. Right? I was at a baseball game for the first time in my life in Boston, and it's so entertaining. But like halfway through, I turned to my husband, who's an American. I'm like, Joe, are we winning? He's like, don't you see the scoreboard? I'm like, there are so many numbers there. I don't know if they're additive. So yeah, that's me. Now let's move away from my vulnerabilities and start with our speakers. I'm going to ask you to tell us something that wasn't in your bio that would be interesting to know for our audience, because anybody can read these off the websites, right? Abdullah, can we start with you?
Sure. Good morning, everyone. Thank you again. In this rainy, gloomy North Carolina Friday morning, you choose to spend time with us. What is in my bio, as you have heard very gracious introduction, Duke students call me with 2 titles. They call me the Turkish Delight Imam. The Imam is the clergy, like rabbi and pastor in the Muslim tradition, and the Blue Devil Imam. And I carry these honorific titles with pleasure. Maybe one slightly ironic, partially painful, tragic, but also incredibly gratifying aspect of my life is I have been banned from 6 countries, either banned or cannot travel anymore because I have court convictions in those countries, including my home country, Turkey. It was 7, but Saudi Arabia forgave me and then took me out of the black or the forbidden list and then put into people who could travel. And I assure you, I am not a criminal, but in the eyes of these governments, or all autocrats, non-democratic governments, I have been banned, or like in Turkey, I'm not banned, I can go, but because I have court convictions, I will rot in jail. My children's reaction is quite fascinating, because for them, I am 5'6", I cannot even walk a mile. To think that I am threatening to anyone is just a laughter that I can always say. But also it's gratifying as an American. It's incredibly painful that in many parts of the world you could be jailed, rejected, banned because of your ideas, because of who you are, not because of what you have done, but your inability to even speak your mind, speaking freely, living in a democratic society. Which makes my own commitment to be an American citizen, American Muslim, and invest in those fabric of pluralistic democracy that we need to live in. We have to make sure those countries who have banned me or will jail me because of my ideas, my disagreement with them, they will transition into democracy. God forbid we will not be, God forbid, transitioning into deterioration and decline of democracy here at home. But then there are elements, many of those liberties and freedom that makes this country beautiful is at risk, and it's challenged by many people in many directions. It should only make us work harder and be a more wholesome person.
What a great introduction. And you know what you shared also leads me to think that in order to lead as a whole person, you need to live in a free society so you can bring your full self
Absolutely.
Without censorship, right?
Absolutely.
So I think, you know, what you shared is a great start to the conversation too, Abdullah. Thank you for that. Luke?
Good morning.
How are you? Sorry.
No, you're fine. Luke is fine. Good morning, everyone. I will begin with what I saw when I got my name tag. It said P and then the year 28. And I had to pause because none of my degrees are from Duke. And I thought it was a mistake. But then it dawned on me that my youngest, my son Zachary, just started at Duke as an undergrad this year. And then you have to know this. My daughter, who's 22, this past spring graduated from the other school, UNC Chapel Hill. So we are, for real, a divided household. But even when my daughter gets out of hand, as it relates to the rivalries, I remind her that Duke money paid her Carolina tuition. And so we live in a kind of divided, fun and friendly environment. But my kids are, you know, I am a proud dad. I mean, to be as I reflect on it, and I will say this because it's so fresh for me. You know, I've been at Duke for 12 years. And you see Duke from a particular perspective as an administrator, a minister, all the many hats I wear, professor. But seeing it now through the eyes of my son has given me not only insight into sort of student affairs and the operations, but a deeper appreciation for Duke, the kind of the environment, the culture, the kind of student that even Joel Fleischman mentioned to me in an interview this summer. Just a deeper appreciation for this special place. I think the other thing I would just say, it's a background. I'm the fifth child. My oldest brother still calls me Baby Luke. I grew up in the home of a pastor, minister, but I grew up in a very musical family. And music, as you know, is very portable. It travels with you. And there were 5 of us. My oldest brother played a trombone. My second brother, saxophone. Third brother was a drummer. My sister's a fabulous musician to this day, pianist. And then I was just walking around, looking good, I guess. But we were known. You hear of the Jackson 5. We were the Powery 5. As we traveled, whenever my father in New York City worked for, at that time it was called the New York Bible Society, very ecumenical, across Christian traditions. And I would say, I'll just flag that. What I learned is, and what is a conviction of mine really, and how my journey has played out, is really to be about border crossings. And I mean, that could be theological, that could be cultural, that could be ethnic, that could be, you name it, ideas, and crossing the borders and geographically, you know, we've done that. My parents originally are from the islands, the Caribbean, so this whole migratory subjectivity is significant in the Black diaspora. And then the idea of growing up, going to out west to California, New Jersey, living in Switzerland, living in Toronto, Canada. And so the sense of, if I can use this in the setting of calling to cross the borders that often have fences up, but to really embrace that as a place for learning and understanding the other has been so significant in my life.
So you opened up another window that I hadn't thought about our background too. I lived in 4 countries. You lived in 3, right? And you lived in several. So like collectively we represent serial immigration and migration, but also this, you know, crossing the borders. I mean, we're very nomadic, all 3 of us.
Yeah.
And it's going to be interesting to carry out the rest of the conversation with that aspect of our identity and what that brings to our leadership. So I've been wanting to get together with Abdullah for 2 years. and I thank everybody who made this event possible so that we can actually sit down and talk.
Indeed.
And then, Luke, I may have mentioned this to you. I'm very, what's the word I'm looking for? Secular when it comes to large university gatherings. So I always go a little like, and every time you speak, my friend, I connect with what you say, although I'm from a different background. And I'm always thankful to your leadership and what you bring to this institution with your speeches and your wisdom. And you make it in such a way that, you know, I'm not Christian, but I connect to what you say and I follow your leadership. So I'm really happy today sitting here and talking to these amazing people. So let's kick this off. We'll have a conversation for about 45 minutes or so, and then we will open it up to your questions, and there will be ample time. So I hope you participate in this conversation. So with all this background, What is whole person leadership to you, and why is it essential to adopt a whole person approach in leadership? Let's start with you, Abdullah, and go
That's
to
a
you.
fascinating question. I for the first time, initially at least, I would like to challenge the two misconceptions as I see it and myth about the whole person or wholeness or wholesome leadership. I think often than not, people sort of see being whole as an instant reality. Like you weren't whole on Friday, but you will be whole on Saturday. Or it's a situational. You are whole in a particular time and space. Whereas all the wisdom traditions I have studied, both secular, coming out of Greek, rational schools, or coming out of Jerusalem, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, or the Buddhist and Hindu traditions, which I lived in that part of the world and immersed myself to it, I have seen no evidence that wholesomeness or being a whole person or a whole leader is seen as an instant reality. Rather, it's seen as a continuum. It's seen as a process. It is always seen as if somebody is whole, that means that person takes the three important dimensions of their being, mind, heart, and the soul, and live a life in personal and professional circles, create realities around them that every step of that personal and professional journey in various identities, in various leadership roles, that person lives an aspirationally wholesome life, in an aspiration, that zip code, that destination that you will probably never arrive. But everything in your life, from what you eat often to what you do in your family life, business life, personal life, is contribution or living in that direction. In a way, wholesomeness is seen not in a state of being in any given moment, but it is always seen as a destination that you are trying to go, and everything that you do in your life, the whole process of life, is sort of leading you in that direction. This is one. That imagination that being wholesome is just a one thing, you can switch on and off. It is only related to one aspect of your life or one period of your life, personal or professional life. I have never seen any evidence of the human accumulated wisdom sees the wholesomeness in that sense. So one thing we should push back to that myth. The second aspect is, it is even more relevant to our society here in the United States or in the West in general, if you will accept that respectful critique. Again, all the wisdom traditions, both secular and religious, I have never seen any evidence that they see being a whole person as an individual act. Or you can sort of be whole on your own, independently from any collective identities or collective realities that you are part of. It is really incredible. A wisdom from the Buddhist tradition, one of the sayings of Buddha, I love it. Somebody asks him, which one is more important teacher? Is it the destination or the process, path that you take into that destination? Which one is more important? And the Buddha famously says, or at least allegedly says, neither the destination nor the path. It is the company you take. It is all about who you walk this journey with. It is all about what kind of surrounding or what kind of collective, social, professional circles that you walk this journey with. So to become a whole person or whole leader as an individual act, and regretfully, our society is incredibly hyper-individual, incredible attention, which is not a bad thing in itself. I come from societies and cultures, everything is collective that it suffocates you. Have you seen my big fat Greek wedding? Mm-hmm. That's my family, that's her family. Like, I have 49 cousins. I have hundreds of cousin children. I don't even know their names. Mm-hmm. Now that I cannot go back to Turkey, I don't even know most of them. Mm-hmm. Coming here and getting some sort of a privacy and individualism is a breath of fresh air. But I miss that collective extended. I am part of a much broader society. Good, bad, and ugly can only happen if I consider and pay attention to who am I walking this journey with? Who am I walking this journey with? What I will end before we turn into my brother and my teacher's deep wisdom is, to me, being a whole person and whole leader, which we'll go into detail, the measure is that person's self-awareness. To me, does this person, in terms of shaping their body and mind, in them and in connection to their societies. Wonderful.
Flash flood? Is it?
I think so.
Warning.
Unless it's a fire alert.
All right.
Or one of the 6 countries are trying to get me. It's a nightmare of my family.
Listen, it is being recorded.
It
in
is,
the movies
it is a
too,
nightmare
so-
of my family that I will be kidnapped and shipped to one of these 6 countries. So does this person have required self-awareness about who they are, especially about their moral superpowers? All of us have like values and virtues, but some values, because of who we are, because of innate gifts that God has endowed in each and every one of us, we are good at few good things. And all of us have vices. All of us have cardinal inclination to do mistakes. All of us have repetition of failures. Like when it comes to certain issues, we either have innate or external sort of weaknesses that we keep repeating certain mistakes. Is this person in a whole life journey of wholesomeness, in connection to their multiple identities to the group of people, whatever collective that they're part of? Do they know this is what I'm good at? That's why to become a whole person and leader as part of a larger community, I need to surround myself with realities, social, personal, professional settings that will sharpen what I'm good at, where I can make a difference. Equally important, I am really not good at X, Y, and Z. I should be incredibly miles far away from any surrounding, any ability that will keep feeding the demons in me or enabling the demons in me. That's my measure of success for a whole person and a whole leader.
That's so interesting, the idea, 2 ideas that stand out to what you just said, this aspirational, lifelong process towards wholeness and desire, and then the community, the community dimensions. I think, and I love that. What I think about is it relates to the whole person, what that means, the first part of the question. I'm bringing, as a leader, my whole self to whatever I'm, the community, the organization, the people, and the whole, this, and its aspirations, right? It's aspirational. The sense of, if you think of the wellness tree that we use here at Duke, the Wellness Center and other organizations, they're trying to get at what it means to be a whole person, the mental wellness, the spiritual wellness, the emotional wellness, financial wellness, all of the various aspects of our human life. So I try to just bring that to the table, so to speak. At the same time, as a leader, those that might be on the chapel staff or religious life staff, which I oversee, there's a sense that I want to affirm their whole person as well. And I mean, the challenge becomes, and I know we'll be talking about this, is how do you nurture that? How do you develop that? How do you create an environment where that happens? But to me, I think why it's important is we can't, even as we aspire to be whole, we bring our whole selves to this room. Whether it's family, dynamics, the kind of day you had yesterday, a conversation you had with a friend, an event you went to, your family backgrounds. You can't escape any part of yourself. It's always with you. You may not be thinking about it consciously. And so we can't bifurcate and separate ourselves you bring everything into the space. And so for me, it's unavoidable in a sense to bring your whole person, even though you may not consciously be thinking about it. And then the other piece is, it's a reminder that we are, as we've heard it said before, we're not human doings, but human beings. And so as a being, it means we are not just a head on a stack of books, right? We have emotions, we have feeling, we have thought. It's mind, body, and we have bodies. that are apart. Maybe they're aching bodies, right? All of those dynamics feed into what kind of day, how you go about your work, how you interact with your boss or your colleagues. And so for me, it's fundamental to what it means to be, well, a human being. And I want to be attentive as a leader to not only my humanness, but those that I'm interacting with, to understand that when somebody comes to work, they are, yes, they're coming to do a particular task, but they also have a full life, right? A whole life, whatever that might be, kids or family or outside hobbies, and all of that feeds into who they are in the workplace. And so for me, it's just a fundamental idea that as we're striving to be whole people, that we can't escape who we are in our totality, even if we try to do that. And so it's fundamental to what it means, I think, to be a human being on the planet, is to seek this wholeness, but also to acknowledge that even if we are not, there's parts of ourselves that we don't want to acknowledge, we want to ignore. We may not even know a part of ourself, that we're fuller, so to speak, we're more whole than what we even imagine ourselves to be.
I don't know about you, but my brain is like, there are all these like sparks happening. So, and this is just the beginning. So my next question is going to be to you, Abdullah, and Luke, please jump in if you want to say something about it. The question is about how can leaders foster an environment that encourages team members to bring their whole selves to work? And I'm going to add some commentary to this question. Yesterday, I was talking to a colleague here at Duke, and he was telling me that he just shared with his entire staff the fact that during the election week, we will probably be quite distracted, no matter what side of the aisle you're on. And he said, I told them to give themselves grace, make room that week for that distraction, and just take care of themselves. Because no matter what the outcome is, which we're not probably going to know for days, it's going to have an impact on folks. And I adored what he did. So, Abdullah, what do you think about how
Before we encourage people to bring whole themselves, we have to do this internal scanning of our leadership, our institution. We have to really ask ourselves, are we really serious and sincere that if this person brings whole themselves into this, that they will be received as we think we would receive them? I think a lot of people, I don't know what's the respectful way of saying, they don't mean it. Like they don't mean to, it is just a fluff and hot air that they blow. And it's just a good thing to say, nice thing to say, because everything they do unwelcome that wholeness. Everything that they do says it's all the bottom line. It's all about the tasks that they are supposed to, they will be even penalized or partially punished, etc. So before we sort of externally communicate that encouragement message, there should be a lot of figurative MRIs and CT scans that needs to be done. And if we are not ready, we shouldn't encourage people, because what is worse is to encourage people, and God forbid if they take you seriously and trust you, that if they bring themselves, if they bring their full themselves. When I have a dying mother, and is there a way I can be flexible or if you are in any way connected to wars in Ukraine or Gaza and Palestine, you wake up early morning like I do. It's one thing even unbearable to be connected to one side of Spain, and there is pain on all sides. But I'm connected to both. I have students in Gaza, I have students in Israel, and every morning I wake up for the last 11 months, somebody is dying, somebody's family is grieving, and things like that. And then I have to come up to work and talk about budget and numbers and things like that.
And you, in the big scheme of things, you're like, what are they doing?
You have a hard time relating to people's trivial, seemingly trivial problems. But then, how can I level with them? How can I not ridicule people's much less maybe pressing, much less death and life kind of situation. But at the same time, how can I bring that pain that I'm carrying with me in my work environment that will be honored, that will be acknowledged? So what I would say is institutionally we have to have, and this cannot be just talk. This could be principles, well established, ideally written principles that institution constantly communicates, organization constantly communicates. This is what we do. And if one of us goes through any kind of hiccups and challenges, there is a mechanism in which we can sort of hold this person in the entire personal and professional and lift them up and show some examples as much as possible.
Yeah. I mean, I think fundamentally the environment, whether it's you're thinking about wholeness or a whole person or bringing, is, trust. How do you create an environment of trust, right, with your colleagues? And it's fundamentally that kind of foundation. Patrick Lencioni, other leadership gurus talk about this. From that foundation, then other things develop. And one of the things I do with my leadership team periodically, I mean, they know, they laugh when and it's not a racial question, but I ask them on Monday, we meet every Monday morning as a team. And my question is what color are you today? And it's a way of getting a sense of where people are. And that means somebody might say blue, and then they start describing that, or yellow, or whatever. And it begins, but it gives me a sense of where they are today. And generally what ends up happening, they start sharing parts of their lives. And not everyone, my leadership team is fine, but we might have other staff members that don't want to be so-called personal in the workspace. And I'm not a person that will use the language, oh, we're a family. I mean, some on the staff, no, we're not a family. I don't blur those lines. But there are some who are less comfortable, per se, and vulnerable in wanting to share. And that's fine too, respect that. But I tend to pose a question just to get people talking and to be okay with it in that environment. It's not necessarily the whole staff either, right? This is my leadership team, so I'm in many ways closer with them, my direct reports. But that has been really insightful and helpful because in those moments, somebody might start talking about a loved one that's in the hospital. And so they were a certain color connected to that. To me, as a leader, it's helpful, but it also reminds me, as a former dean who's no longer here, I remember talking about others in a broad sense to say, well, you don't just want to be tactical, but you also want to be relational, right? And so how do you hold those together, in a relationship, actually? Because I think our staff members, our colleagues, maybe this is idealistic and I'm romanticizing, but would and do want to know that we care for them, right? And a sense for their development and growth, whether it's professionally, and I make the move also thinking personally, yeah, I do want to know, about your life and get to know you in a fuller way over time. I mean, but that comes with time.
Yeah.
It's not an immediate overnight shift.
Yeah.
And that could only be achieved, as I said, if there is a in the identity of the organization, institution that they work, culture, there is some language committed to that level of openness and the leadership every once in a while. In Singapore, if you have not been there, it's an amazing country, and that hasn't banned me yet, even though I am criticizing some of their practices.
Aspirational now.
Yeah, it's like everything works so perfectly in that country. It's bizarre. It's nauseating. Nothing goes wrong. Everything is efficient. But in case if something goes wrong, regularly they shut the electricity and water in different sections of this city island so that people will build resiliency, they will get the idea. So it's not even enough to have the sort of principles and the vision and the mission statements articulating this very clearly to anybody who's coming to the organization. But leadership has to, it's not as insincere acting, but leadership has to sort of even stage and show and model and exemplify that commitment. When there's an organic opportunity, that's fine. But if it's not happening, there should be some drills that it is in action communicated to the
Very interesting.
collective organization.
Very interesting. So, look, you alluded to when you're doing this exercise with your small group of leaders, you said something about sharing it in that environment and not necessarily broader. So that's, limits of vulnerability or being a whole person, right? So along with that, my next question is about sort of limits of being a whole person. Do you think certain backgrounds make it more challenging for leaders to embrace whole person leadership? How does intersectionality impact this approach? And this is something that I'm always mindful of as an immigrant woman leader who speaks English with an accent. And having to lead an organization, that's a lot about change. So I'm very mindful about to what extent my vulnerability is a weakness. Because a lot of times, let's face it, when men are vulnerable, it's adorable and endearing. When women are vulnerable, it just reinforces the fact that we're the weaker sex. So, what are your thoughts on how does intersectionality factor into this whole person leadership?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question.
I started with a softball. This is a hard one.
Yeah, it is. I mean, the whole session could be on this. And really, I mean, the intersections could be obviously gender, race, class, family background, you name it, right? All of our life experiences, identities, all of that is part of the intersections. And I think it's going to depend on the person in terms of maybe they were shaped on one level and the culture of the organization. So a person who's a leader who has come to what you just mentioned, this kind of demonstration of vulnerability that might come from a woman or a kind of perception of emotion, right, might feed into be perceived as, because of a kind of historic stereotype about women, gendered stereotype, as, oh, this person's weak, is not really a good leader. And I think that then it depends on that leader to understand what kind of culture they're in and to choose accordingly how they are vulnerable or not, right? There's a level of, we can use the word discernment, wisdom, in terms of what you do, when you do, and how you do. What you do, what you say, when you say it, how you say it. There's a level of ongoing discernment, regardless of your backgrounds. Others may feel as if they come from a background and it's like, this is my work life, this is my family life. They do not interact in any way. And so at work, I am this maybe cold, figure guarded leader. And at home, I'm not. I'll play on the floor with my dog, but I'm not showing that part of me. Again, that has to do with histories, stories, rhetorical tropes that one has embraced over time. And it's just, it's going to depend, in my mind, it's going to depend on what kind of background. So it's not a one-size-fits-all to this, but it depends on who you are. And I can speak for myself just to make a personal move. I think when I came to Duke, right? I came here, I was teaching full-time faculty at Princeton Theological Seminary. And I came here, it was what a move, what a quick transition. And coming here, so I'm the sixth dean of the chapel, in the history of the chapel. I'm the first Baptist, right? I'm the first Black, all of these first. And it was such a quick move. I never really spent time down here at the university, the context, the environment. Over time, and this goes to your part about a kind of process. I would say early on, for different reasons, right? I'm doing a kind of assessment of the place and people and all kinds of things. And so I'm more guarded, right? I also was young. I don't know if I'm still young, but I at the time when I came and in that role. And so you have all of these dynamics, all of these, imposter syndrome, all of these things that are at play. And so I know for myself, if I'm honest, that I was more guarded, right? There is a sense of, and that's when you're protecting the self, protecting your mind, your heart, your family, because you're a foreigner trying to understand the new landscape. But something happened over time, and maybe that's just getting your feet more on the ground, understanding Duke, the chapel, divinity school, all of the many hats. Something happened, I would say in 2018. I started in 2012, and it wasn't really until maybe it was an evolution, so that wasn't the kind of it over time. But what I can remember is a kind of what I call the opening. I've told my students. And what I mean by the opening, and I'm not sure exactly why, but that was a level of vulnerability that I began to open myself to my staff. And I'm thinking day-to-day staff members, right? I had friends at Duke, and yes, I was open, but I'm thinking about the organization and in a way, and what I discovered was a level of freedom in that. And I'm not talking about bleeding on people, but opening up who I am in a greater way. What I saw is that my opening up of myself was the door for others to open up themselves. And it kind of mutual vulnerability. And that's, every single staff member, you have to, you engage them differently. Everyone has different needs, they have different backgrounds, they're a different kind of person, and so I interact with them differently. But I called it the opening, and it's that opening, it's like an open tomb that really has set me into a future that's been unimaginable.
Yeah.
And so there's a level of freedom and discovery and uncertainty even with that.
But I think there's also the aspect of when we talk about dialogue being so important, that especially right now, having those multiple dimensions, being vulnerable about our dimensions and being receptive to other people's dimensions, it seems to me that also enables us to engage in deeper dialogue. Not one-dimensional, but multidimensional, because we basically are multidimensional entities.
I would add to that beautiful description, Yakut, is dialogue with ourselves, internal dialogue. That's why I really believe level of self-awareness, both individually and collectively, is essential to live a wholesome life and perform and practice a wholesome leadership. All of us, I think Dean Powery here sort of exhibited that self-awareness in such honest and vulnerable and beautiful way. All of us have chips on our shoulders, all of us. Even if you're a member of the minoritized community or majoritized community, or if you are and knowing what kind of chips you carry with yourself and why. How much of these chips are things that I can just dust it off? How much of it is, it's not going to go anywhere. I have to learn how to live with it. Part of it is my experience with previous people, which current people have nothing to do. So some people cut me in the past, I shouldn't be bleeding on others. But some of it is, it's not going to go anywhere, like accent and gender and country of origin, sexual orientation, it's not going to go anywhere. Your ability to know your own chips and how does it make you behave will improve your ability to understand other people's chips, and creating that kind of an environment where people can honestly talk about the chips on their shoulders is an essential.
Very, very insightful. I'm going to change the plan a little bit and jump to one of the later questions. How does spirituality and faith factor into whole person leadership in your experience? But beyond that, is it a must-have, or can you, yeah? Is this something that,
I have seen saints in the Wall Street. I have seen saints in the halls of Goldman Sachs, Pentagon, and I have seen evil people and evil realities in Vatican, in Mecca and Medina. So I don't think religion or lack of it is essentially required to create a whole people or whole person. But over and over again, and religion can even do the opposite. Religion can disable you, destroy your ability to be a whole person and a whole leader. And there are many examples of it. But it would be an unjust and unfair characterization to faith and religion and spirituality that religion, if it works well, has no role, has no power, has no way of sort of instilling these ideas and values that will emerge, that will sort of make you into kind of ideal person that you are in. So I understand the complexities around religion and why organized religion is declining so significantly. I welcome it. I think it will save religion from itself. That I'm glad less people are going to organize religion. But when I look at the student population, the largest group on campus we call it none, N-O-N-E. They are not affiliated. They are checking out of the membership of Judaism, Christianity, Islam, Buddhism, and Hinduism. And I again celebrate it because none of them become a militant atheist. None of them become a Richard Dawkins or they don't hate religion. I met those people. They just check out. They are still asking a different kind of question. They are demanding different question to organized religion, faith traditions, even forms of spirituality that is quite liberating. That means this generation, especially in the younger generations, they still see the role of a religion that can convincingly, powerfully communicate some of the ethical, moral teachings, but they don't want to sign up the membership form. And I think that's fine. That means we have to tear down the walls of the churches and the mosques and the synagogues and have a message to the outsider world. And without demanding membership, without putting them into a captive audience, do we still have something inspiring, something transformative to tell and communicate? And that's the business I am in. So in a way, what I just said in quickly, people who trash religion because religion has been source of violence, death, and destruction, they are only telling a partial truth. Like it is a missed opportunity to box religion into bad examples, box religion into just what happens in the four walls of house of worship. Religion has an incredible power to still make us whole societies and whole individuals.
Yeah, I would, let me just say this, right? I mean, I serve here in a religious role. But I don't want to be an extremist to say, oh, just like Abdullah was saying, have to be kind of engaged faith or spirituality to be whole. But however, to your last point, imagine all of the hospitals, the schools, the orphanages,
adoption centers,
right? The church, adoption centers that have been started, civil rights movement. Right? Fundamentally, we're religious people. So all of the good that is possible.
Okay, so
Even probably a religious person created the technology. Who knows?
tornado warning.
Okay. So there's, to me, if I think about being whole, I would say, even that wellness tree, right, as the spiritual, even the motto of the university, if I just think about that, eruditatio et religio, is an aspiration for integration and wholeness of spirituality, religio, and rationality. So there's something embedded in the roots of Duke, and to this day, that is aiming for this wedding, this relationship between spirit and reason, however you want to say it, faith and learning. And why? Why is there something called at Duke, that the Duke Endowment funded, called the Purpose Project, which is supposed to help students basically engage in a fuller way with their lives, not just the chemistry lab report and these kinds of things, but to think about what's the meaning of life? Why do I live? What's a good life? What's implicit is this deep desire. It may not be faith, though many would come through that lens, but a kind of spiritual, to understand that when we say spiritual, we also mean material realities. Often the Neoplatonic philosophy, Plato, and this idea that to become more spiritual, to become immortal, one has to escape the earth. No, we're talking about, at least within I'll speak out of the Christian tradition, no, to become more spiritual, you have to get more material. You have to incarnate. Thus, the hospitals, the schools, the Duke universities of the world. And to me, it is the aspiration for the et in the eruditio et religio. It's the and, it's the conjunctive imagination that is at play as an educator to say, you may not, even the breath, I would argue, even though I'm not, I would argue.
Be controversial here.
Yeah, no,
please.
but I would argue that we have breath, right, in us. We're breathing here as far as I know. And in religious traditions, in the Judeo-Christian tradition, ruach, right, or pneuma is spirit, but it also means breath and wind. So whether there's a kind of conscious acknowledgement of this breath, of this spirit, we are spirited beings, inspirited beings, and as we go about our lives, we go about our work, we go about being leaders in the world, the spirit, the breath is with us. And so we cannot escape this breath because we're inhaling and exhaling, and we have our being in this breath, in this spirit, wherever we are. And so I would say we have a fuller sense of purpose, perhaps, as we engage spirituality, faith, religion, however you want to say it. The last thing I'll say is religio, an opportunity for us to reclaim religio. That's in the motto. Obviously, it means religion. And people often just think, well, the word means to bind. And people often think it's the binding of humanity and divinity. Okay, so there is that dimension. But there's also another dimension of religio. It is the human bonds. It is the binding of communities together, human beings. There's a way to think about religio, not just in a theological sense, but also a sociological sense. And so as we talk about dialogue and conversation and academic freedom and free inquiry and pluralism and all of these things that are emerging here in a greater way, we cannot sleep on religio because it is the bind, it is the fruit, it is the place, the bonds of bringing formation of community here at Duke and on our staffs, wherever they may be. And so I see the great fruit of it, is what I'm saying, in the end, the faith and spirituality, because for the good and the ill, the evil that we've seen, yes, religious people have done it historically, it is still very much a part of people's lives, many people's lives. Their faith or religious tradition, whatever it might be, prayer, nuns, they still believe in something. They still have faith in something. And I think it's just important for us to acknowledge that and not to ignore it.
Yeah. What's resonated with me is You talked about purpose. You talked about community, people coming together, and religion usually does that, right? So from a, again, secular perspective, purpose and community and doing things together for transformational learning experiences is what, resonated with me outside of all of the religious, and awareness that aspect is an important aspect of the whole person, having it or not having it, right? In you and in others that you work with. Do you all feel safe to stay and ask questions? I don't want to ignore the fact that there's always these things coming, but I think we're good here. Yeah, I don't know where else to go anyway. So yeah, we have some.
Right.
That's earthquake. So we have time for questions, folks. I'm like, how am I sitting here next to these two people and like
so
soaking
kind.
it all in? I feel very privileged right now. Questions? Yes, please.
If you could, those who ask questions, just your name and
I was going to say that.
Alexandra Miller Clark, Duke 94. So recently I was mentoring a young woman who is on a board with me, and I would describe her as a hothead right now. And if you ever read Benjamin Franklin's autobiography, and he came up with his 12 virtues, and his friend was like, Ben, you need another one. Humility. You're unbearable. And then he added humility, and then because of the addition of humility, he started to flower up what he said and like preamble before he said what he needed to say. And he attributes that to him becoming a great negotiator. So I feel like this young lady also needs that, because she's so smart and talented, but she's very impatient, and she'll be like, I'm going to quit the board, and they're not fast enough for her. And I was saying to her, see this as a spiritual challenge for you to develop your patience and your ability to get things done in such a way, in a better way. And she's like, well, this is a good time for me to tell you I'm an atheist. So I said, okay, change it to see this as a psychological challenge. And so my question is, how are you sensitive when you speak to people of all different religions or no religion, like we're saying most Duke students today check off none? What's the best way to speak in a sensitive way to recognize the diversity of religion or lack of religion?
that's a wonderful question, if I may, very quickly.
Please.
I wonder, I don't know this person, but some of the challenges that I see is maybe potentially stemming from this hyper-individualism, that you are running this journey just by yourself, with your priorities, with your interests, with your passion, with your enthusiasm. There is incredible wisdom. You don't have to be religious at all in that African proverb. Like if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, if you want to just take this mission of this board or the organization as far as possible, you have to walk with people. You have to walk with a group of people. Again, no religion or spirituality or no commitment whatsoever is necessary. And therefore, are you committed to walk with people or yourself? I think sometimes for some people, they can't walk people. Their hyper-individuality is in such levels that they want to do this. And there are things that they can do on their own. They are a solo business, one-person show, one man, one woman, one being show that they would like to run. That setting may not be the right setting for them. Because if you are on a board of an organization, that means you are committing yourself to walk with the... And the Prophet Muhammad has a saying, not to be preachy, walk in the speed of the weakest. Like if you are committed to walk with a group of people, see whoever is walking the slowest, that should be the direction. That should be the speed limit. That should be the auto cruise that you should be setting up and walking this journey with. So I think it's a partially personality issue, also partially what is your main goal? Do you want to do this all by yourself or with a group of people? That decision needs to be made.
I think what I would say, my approach to even working here at Duke and engaging all kinds of people, religious and non-religious, I mean, is, and this is where even in the conversations about identities, political, gender, you name it, go down the line, race, I approach it as, are you a human being? I come to it as a human, and it's connected to humility. Because human, as we know, the word comes from humus in Latin, which means from the earth, right? We are all dust. And to dust we will return. And so for me, I think of this as, I'd see that person in front of me. It's linked to humility. It's linked to what it means to be human. But I see even myself as, I call it the ethics of dust. This idea of how I engage another person through this lens of our humanity, our dustiness, so to speak, has been super, I would say, constructive for me. Regardless of, I don't care if whatever your political party is or, are you a human being in front of me? And so then that is the common ground, that we are all from the ground. And so that's the starting place. And then we have to work with, attitude and all of these other things that you mentioned. But I think fundamentally in the day and age we live, even if we think Israel, Gaza, even if all of the humanitarian efforts out of Duke in these regions, it has to do with the human. One of the doctors, either Dr. Cohen, Seth Cohen, or Dr. Hassan, a week or so ago, said something about there is no enemy in the hospital as they're operating, doing surgery in this devastating context. There's no enemies in the hospital. And there is something deep in the moments of tragedy, crisis, right? People, when Katrina happened in New Orleans, people just jump in, or a devastating hurricane that's coming through Florida and other, people jump in. They're not necessarily asking, are you this religion or that religion? They're jumping into the human need. And I think that's where, that's a lens, the humus, the humanity of us all, has been so helpful, right? It's a human-centric, I think San Yin, human-centric leadership is critical.
Thank you so much for joining this today. This has been so fascinating for me. I'm curious from your perspective in the leadership within religious organizations, where are you have concerns and what are you, perhaps in a more positive way, some bright lights or inspiration? And I say this because I was raised Catholic and baptized all my kids Catholic, and we moved away from the Catholic Church to the Episcopal. And they're women leaders.
Which makes you very Catholic, by the way.
Well, when we joined the Episcopal Church, the woman put her arms around me and said, we get a lot of Romans. So I think that happens. But my kids are involved in the youth group, and they go to this pilgrimage in Taizé, and there's a total change in what has happened to my 3 kids because of just the leadership of this congregation. And so just in a time when we need community more than ever and people feel so isolated, I just was curious if you are inspired or what your thoughts are about the leadership within religious organizations.
I'll just name one example here at Duke, and Taizé changed my life. I'll just say that when I was back in 2000. But I will say here, particularly on the ground in Durham, that has been very inspirational. And it kind of slowed down because of the pandemic and things. So there's a nonprofit organization in Durham called the Religious Coalition for a Nonviolent Durham. And one of the efforts that they are engaged in is re-entry of prisoners back into society. And what they develop, and there's a huge prison engagement initiative now at Duke that's out of the Kenan Institute. This is the second year, multifaceted. There's different work groups for different things. But what is reemerging now with this organization, and I'm bringing it up because there are many, they used to call them, and then maybe they still do, faith teams. These are people that want to help someone who was formerly incarcerated enter back into society, be their friend, walk alongside them, have meals, encourage, help them find employment. And many of the people of faith are engaged in that effort. Also, people who are not of kind of religious tradition are engaged. But to me, something so serious as our thinking about our carceral system and people, human beings coming back into society and trying to extend hope, right? And reclaim their humanity in society. There are communities that are surrounding them as these efforts kind of reemerge post-pandemic now. And so that's just one example where it's really material, coming back to that. It's really spiritual and material together. And it's real life. It's not just taking up an issue that's some national, but it's local. And sometimes we can be scared of right where we are to engage, and we want to go to another country in another world. We're so globally minded, we're no locally good. And I have seen people of faith, in this one particular, help human beings enter back into society. So it gives me hope.
I will quickly answer. There is a psalm repeated in the Jewish and Christian tradition that is almost identically repeated in the Quran as well. God says to David, Shiru Adonai Shir Hadash, sing me some new songs. In a way, God is telling David, some of the old songs are not working anymore. Like, it's just not pleasing God anymore. It's not fulfilling godly commitments. So a lot of religions, my concern is they don't hear that voice from Sinai, that some old songs are irrelevant, inaccessible at best. It's hurting, violent, sexist, homophobic at worst. So for those who know how to sing some new songs without divorcing themselves from completely religion, without just throwing the religion under the bus altogether, sort of still committed to the orthodoxy and the core teachings of the religion, but knows how to sing a new song that answers questions, that doesn't make them hateful to others, that doesn't make them hateful to women, that doesn't question and put people down because of their sexual orientation. That's the kind of question that new generation is asking. If that new melody in that accessible, inclusive, and pluralistic sense is heard, it's like your children's reaction. You see flocks of people are coming as well. If I may very quickly, there's a beautiful Sufi story in the Islamic mystical tradition. When they explain what religion is, they tell this following story. There's a 20-minute version, but I'll tell you a 2-minute version of it. That God created all the creatures, and in the beginning of the creation, the birds didn't have wings. They didn't know how to fly. And God comes down from the heaven. We don't know how, but God plays music. God plays these heavenly melodies to these birds. Beautiful music, moving, transforming the birds. They are all high without smoking anything. And then when God goes back up to the heaven, out of that longing, out of that desire, out of that intense wanting to hear that music again, birds started spreading wings because they wanted to fly and they wanted to be closer to the heavens. So in ideal world, religion is that music. If you know how to sing it, if you know how to sing it for every generation, every people, without being, forgive my French, jerk, racist, hateful person, and then sing that music that will allow people to spread wings and legs and wanting to hear that music over and over again because it makes them better people.
If we had religious leaders and philosophers like these two in the world, right? What a different world it would be, my friends.
There are better
Yeah,
ones.
we have time.
There are better ones out there.
Most
Good morning. My name is Michael Summy, Trinity 90, Fuqua 95. And never has the 4.5-hour drive from DC been more beneficial, first of all. But I wanted to talk a little bit about bringing one's whole self into a professional environment. And specifically, Luke, when you mentioned the opening, I'm a little familiar with that opening. Sometimes it works, and sometimes it doesn't. So what I'm trying to figure out is, how do you know that balance between when you can share and be open with people, and when it's not, maybe not a good time to do that, and how do you, as far as making yourself whole and being a manager that can really impact the workplace, how do you find that fine line, that balance?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question, right? Because I mean, sometimes, and especially kind of in a religious setting, I've found it with grace and forgiveness, and it's like, okay, yeah, those are great ideals, but we're talking about, did you do your job, right? And so I would say, I come back to that word, discernment. Like, for me, all of leadership, all the areas of leadership and work have to do with discerning, knowing what to say, when to say, how to say, what to do, when to do, how to do. And then that has to do with sort of emotional intelligence, or in a sense, to me, it has to do with spirit, because spirit is a wind that blows where it wills. And so you have to be flexible and fluid of knowing let's say your direct report or your colleague or whoever it might be, that maybe now is not the time to have this conversation or to create the opening. Maybe it's better to do it next week at another time, based on other variables of the situation happening with that person. Or even you might not, as a leader, because of whatever variables, it may not be the right time to share. And maybe it's next year. I mean, there is a level of discretion, right? With discernment, discretion, and holding yourself, self-awareness, holding information, because it's not the right time. And if I did it in this moment, it wouldn't come out in the right way. And so I think there is this sense of a kind of discernment and wisdom of knowing when and who and how and what. So there's, how's that for an answer? Clear as mud?
I would like to also very briefly, you know what I do? Michael, right?
Yes.
For me, I always, in my mind, what is the worst case scenario? I'm about to go for an opening with a people or a group of people. What is the worst case scenario? And if I'm not in a position to face that worst case scenario, I don't. Just knowing yourself, like, what is the risk? Losing friendship? Am I willing? At the worst case scenario, I'm going to lose friendship, or I'm going to get fired, or I'm going to be banned from these countries. I'm not going to be able to ever go home again, which is so painful. And then that worst case scenario, if you feel in your heart that you are ready to take that on, and you are ready to pay that cost or challenge that risk, then it doesn't matter. Like, if you are ready, quite honestly, it's irrelevant. You go for it. But if not, if you're going to put yourself and your family members in at risk, or emotionally you're not ready to experience that potential loss, financial and otherwise, you shouldn't. You absolutely shouldn't.
If I may offer something that didn't come up yet, and it goes back to what you said earlier at the beginning, how being a whole person is a community, it's a team sport, right? It's not an individual sport. One thing that I found out, that if you have trust within, like, around you, folks actually give you clues about where and when to be vulnerable and authentic. So most recently, for example, I shared we were talking about the implicit bias, and I told folks that several years ago I took this test, and turns out I have some ageist biases, because we're coming from an ageist society. And that makes me always question my decisions and be very aware and whatnot, which, in my mind, I shared my vulnerabilities, and, here you are. And most of the people in that group thought the same way. And one of my trusted direct reports came to me, and she's like, Yakut, that belonged to a smaller group, because in this larger group, there are some actions that we're going to take, and there may be repercussions. So she educated me about, how wrong I was, very, very kindly and in a nice way, right? So, but I felt good about the trust that I have within my, close community that would educate me on these types of things. Because, we're human. We're not always have the best, self-awareness, awareness about our surroundings, the costs of, being open or about to say something. So I want to bring that, community element and having some
Most
trusted
definitely.
advisors around you.
Just recently, literally, today's Friday, it might have been Monday, I had my leadership team meeting, something happened in that meeting, and it was the next day when I saw some others in that room. I actually, because I've told some of them, look, if I have lettuce on my face, please tell me, right? And in my one-on-ones with these two, or just a phone call, or I touched base with the others to say, did I overreact? I was checking myself in terms of, trying to see how I responded. Was the how and even the what, appropriate because there's others in the room. And I just want to, but again, the trust is there.
Yes.
And I'm open to having feedback.
And I think,
I think-
feedback piece, that's one thing that Michael, thank you for the question, because I think it's allowing us to add an element that we didn't talk about, seeking feedback and doing those corrective loops and learning from it. And that goes back to the journey.
That,
Yeah.
that, feed,
It's a
that
journey.
feedback is a tricky business because especially...
Gets you banned from countries?
No,
Is that
no.
what you're saying?
I've seen this with myself and with people that I trust. You sort of, as you rise in the leadership ladder and the food chain, you sort of develop this feedback circle that validates how great you are, how wonderful you are. And then you eliminate those who are just a thorn in the thigh and telling always you. I cannot eliminate my wife and my children because they tell me as it is. But in the workplace, you can eliminate without even sometimes realizing. You sort of get into this feedback loop that is only pumping air into your ego, and you are not if you are not intentional. Like I'm going to intentionally and deliberately choose people who will give me the feedback that I need, not just the feedback I want. You can recognize yourself sometimes. But let's engage with more questions. Yes.
Hi. First, thank you so much. I have so many notes and so many questions and so many things to reflect on from this session. So thank you. Thank you. Deidre Williams Gordon, class of 1996. I was struck by the comments about leadership needing to articulate language that's committed to the whole self before asking people to bring their whole selves. And I think the phrase was you need to stage, show, and model regularly this and have drills and practice around this. What does that look like practically in a community or a workplace setting, et cetera?
That's exactly what we are working in response to this Israeli-Palestinian conflict. All universities caught incredibly unprepared for communities to hold themselves, how they are experiencing what's going on there. And we checked all the vision, mission statements and the principles that Duke University has articulated. It falls incredibly short. It falls incredibly short. I'm giving you a very live example as we are doing it over here. So we are now trying to come up what those articulation would look like, but more so, what would it look like in action? The tendency was, let's bring our favorite Jew and a favorite Palestinian and then stage Let's Get Along campaign. And I cannot be grateful enough for people who spewed the wisdom, who sort of pulled us down from that kind of temptation. That these communities are grieving intensely. What they need is not dialogue or engagement. If you force it, you will only hurt them more. What they need is a recognition of their pain. So the highest levels of Elam building has to go and sit in a shiva and sit in a matam with the Muslim community on campus. They don't need to be educated or lectured about the complexities of Israeli-Palestinian conflict. They want some sort of an acknowledgement, action, that I understand how horrific it was to experience as a Jew to see 1,200 members, largest number of Jews killed after Holocaust, barbarically, evilishly, burned, raped. I want you to know that my leadership knows what that means, what kind of fire, what kind of a 2,000-year grit of pain I am connecting to, not just October 7. And similarly, the community is experiencing tens of thousands of innocent civilians being killed. I have lost more than a dozen students of mine that I worked so hard to get them a scholarship so they can be engineers and doctors. And after they earned their degrees, they went back to Gaza to serve their own people. Just died senselessly. I am not ready for that kind of schmoozy dialogue and engagement. I want my leader to sit down with me and cry with me and sort of be in solidarity with my pain without necessarily rejecting any other pains. It's not either or. Just be, can you establish a presence? And I'm proud if you don't see Duke University on the headlines of Washington Post and New York Times, the way Columbia is, UPenn is, that's something to be proud of. Again, we have a lot of work to do. We are only 1 minute away from next scandal. We can easily go there. But the fact that for the 11 months we are holding the community together is there is both attempt to articulate these values and then in action show how do you honor somebody's wholesome. That community is not ready to engage. That community is not ready to sort of be lectured at or reduce their pain into let's just get along, etc. I hope this will give you one example of what would that look like. Another sort of maybe minor, less dramatic example, I've seen this. My mother died, or my husband is cancer. Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. And then the next minute, I want to make sure that budget sort of Excel sheet is on my table next. Like if you do that, if you don't see that somebody is going through this major life event, and as long as you have no evidence that they are lying or there is some sort of a manipulation act, and if you know that that is true, it's an opportunity for you to show the rest of the team. I will tell you one example. One of my staff, I have a small staff of 6 people now. She only told us she was pregnant when she was 8 months pregnant. And I was so ashamed of my inability to create that open space that she could have shared that. Because in her previous 2 jobs, the moment people find out that she was pregnant, they gave her every signal that this is unwelcome, or her motherhood is not related to her employment or will not be honored. In this 3rd pregnancy, she had to hide her pregnancy from us for 8 months. Like, it was an incredible, I took it very personally that somehow that aspect of life, we couldn't communicate better. So when it will happen, like when other aspects of non-work related, this utilitarian, pragmatic aspect of our job, it's an opportunity for a leader to show the whole team that this is important. We are not going to compromise the mission of the work, but we will go some extra miles to see how we can still get the job done, but also honor these people's life experiences, etc.
Yeah.
That's so
I
good.
fought cancer last year. One last thing. I fought cancer last year. I'm fine. I'm cancer-free, thanks to science and technology and Duke Health. But I had this moment of, do I tell people? I'm building a new organization, again, weakness thing, right? Am I going to be perceived as, oh, she's out the door now? But then the moment I decided to tell my team, first small team, again, being mindful about where to share, the amount of support you get. But I'm also hoping that when they have challenges, they will have the courage and they will feel liberated to share with the rest of us so that they can receive that kind of support. And I firsthand lived through, there is this thing like hanging over my head, and I'm here doing budget, right? So that helps you, like, you can say, folks, I know we need to do this, but, I have a biopsy, so it liberates you as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I called all of that, it was just both of these, that's sit in the dust with people, in the humanity. Sit in our humanness with one another, not just in the pain, but in the joys,
Yes.
right? The birth of the child that's come.
Yeah.
Sit in the dust with each other.
Yeah, sit in the dust.
Thank you all for sharing and also for your vulnerability. My name is Joyce Walker Highhouse, and I'm Fuqua class of 2006. building on what you all have been talking about, I wonder if you can also talk about it from the perspective of the double, triple bottom line, and how do we think about that and think about, are there goals or ways that you think about leading the whole person from a mission critical perspective?
You have?
Oh. So Duke is, I mean, I worked at too many institutions in 4 different countries, and I feel like everything I've done in my career led me to, this is what I was looking for. Because one of the things I observed here is a lot of support, humility, whole personness, diversity in the leadership team. This is the first job I feel, of course, I started here, how am I here, all sorts of imposter syndrome, but I quickly overcame that because it is in the DNA, it is in, from top down. It's something, being whole and being vulnerable and authentic is something that's valued. And I see that as critical as connected to the mission criticalness. And, how can you achieve the things that we're aspiring for at Duke, especially in terms of freedom of inquiry and, diversity, equity, inclusion, without really acknowledging the wholeness of people and their multidimensionality, and then without bringing our multidimensionality as top leaders.
The triple down bottom line is a cancer. It's really a cancer. And I work at Duke because there is less of that cancer here. It's almost untreatable virus of the world's largest and most effective religion, capitalism, have inflicted on us. It's untreatable, like all viral infections. The fact that bottom line obsession is go away is a very naive idea. Like all untreatable viral infection, we have to learn how to live with it. We have to learn and minimize and put a healthy pressure to that mentality. Because ultimately, the way we live our lives, the way the economy runs, in a way, capitalism won. I sort of, in a defeated and surrendered sense, that bottom line cannot be ignored, the job needs to be done. Is there a way we can make this as human as possible? I have cousins in Germany and France. When they give birth, they get 1 year paid leave. And they get their job done. My wife only got 3 weeks, and she had to go back to ER nurse to do that job. Like, there is something incredibly inhuman if you think about this. If you look at the kind of humane aspect of our professional life. In America, we have to constantly fight, but with the acknowledgement, being cognizant that this is not going to go away. This is the way we live our life. We just learn how to live with it, at least within the place where we have the leadership role and influence and power. Like in my team, at least, I honor that 3 weeks, 4 weeks, whatever the Duke bylaws are. But when the person comes back to work, I have a power to make this hybrid. Division of labor is different. I can make this in a way that she only needs to come once a week, so the rest of the work can be done at home. Like, we have a way to navigate this, but it's not going to go away completely.
Yeah, so she can be at work as a mother, right?
Yeah.
Not leave that motherness at home.
Right.
Yeah.
But,
And-
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we're almost at time.
One
And
last question.
One last
I'll make it quick.
question, yes.
I don't know that it's easy, but I'll make it quick. Hi, I'm Jody Gans. I'm class of 94 and parent 25. Sort of some of the through line, creating an atmosphere of trust and maybe at its essence, just relating to each other as humans, at the barest sense. But how does that work with, kids these days who are, at the same time maybe skeptical of organized religion, but also skeptical of people that are not their religion or different backgrounds, super tribal, with the overlay of not knowing how to engage in hard conversations. There's no civil discourse. So how do you create a community of trust amongst people who are not equipped to be able to see each other as human when they're coming from such different backgrounds?
I think this is more general, but before you can talk about dialogue, right? So this has to do with, it has to do with community formation. How do you get people to begin to learn about each other just as a human being? I mean, in the center here on campus, Center for Truth, Racial Healing, and Transformation, that's led by Dr. Charmaine Royal, and the Kellogg Foundation funded it. One of the things that they do in what they call the racial healing circles, that when they pull, and it's facilitated by somebody who's been trained, and you have a circle, the conversation is not even about race. Maybe it's about a parent or a hobby. And what they're trying to do in that is kind of my answer, that how do we create spaces to learn about people? Maybe I'm a New York Yankees fan, right? Somebody wouldn't know that unless we talk baseball and grew up playing Little League baseball, right? All of a sudden, wow, I see him in a different way, right? Good or bad, right? Yankees fan, who knows? But how do we create meals, eating together, serving together perhaps, community service? But so you're doing something together. I'm eating, I'm building a house with Habitat for Humanity or whatever it might be, going to the Duke UNC football game together. So it's a kind of, what did I say in sociology? Familiarity breeds liking. I don't know if that's exactly true, but it breeds liking. It may not, but the sense of being around others who are different from you before you get deep into dialogue and free speech and all of that. How do we create spaces, human spaces, for interaction and relationships? That's what I would say. I mean, what are those things? But I think of eating together, I think of playing together, I think of serving together as a way to
I think
move in that direction.
behavioral change is impossible in a sustained way if there is no change in the ideas. Actions, both individually and collectively, is a result of ideas that we have in our mind. For last two questions, especially about all the questions, the kind of place where we want to go, it will never happen if you sort of interrogate what some of the ideas that we have. And in that sense, if these are challenges, that means the kind of information we are receiving, education, sermons, news that we are consuming is not challenging those ideas in our mind, and we should diversify. We are what we eat, both literally and figuratively. Are there new ideas, especially ideas coming from less developed countries, more traditional societies? I'll give you one example. My mom came here and visited us. She's a very traditional woman. She's completely illiterate. She's never been to school because we grew up in a slum in Turkey. She doesn't know how to sign her name. She used ink to put a fingerprint. You would think like someone like her has nothing to teach you. At a supermarket, I met a colleague of mine and I introduced, I've been at Duke 10 years now. She and I are office mates in the Divinity School, our office is on the same floor. And I introduced my mom, I'm doing the translation. Oh, she's been your friend and colleague for 10 years. And she immediately sort of asked her, she wants to boost about my wife, her daughter-in-law. She's an amazing cook. She must have been to my house, and you must have tried her cooking. And then quickly she realized that this colleague who has the same office on the same floor for 10 years has never been to my house. Her embarrassment and shame was so visible. I thought she was going to slap me right in front of. She turned to me, thank God, in Turkish, like, what kind of an animal I raised? Like, how can somebody who could be your office mate for 10 years has never been, like, in her value system, this is unforgivable sin, as if I killed someone. Next day, this colleague was at my house. Like, there are some alternative ways to receive these shocks that we sometimes, especially in developed countries like the United States, we think like we have all the good ideas.
Yeah.
We have all the best ideas. If we are not where we want to be, where we should be, that means we should diversify. Who can sort of shock moral imagination and wake us up? And maybe we have something to learn from other people in that sense.
That's a wonderful way to wrap this up. And in a world that is becoming more and more technological, and with the advent of AI, I mean, we keep hearing this, we need to double down on our humanity. And I think this conversation this morning was in a lot of ways, how do we double down and how do we bring our humanity in its fullness to the work that we do. Thank you very much for being here and engaging in this conversation with us. Please join me in thanking our amazing speakers here.
And our wonderful moderators.
Thank you so much.